Will this be the Fallout review that we all wanted? A review that explains why the Fallout TV show is so amazing. I asked 2 videos in a row for anyone to just do the most simplest thing and explain why the Fallout TV show is amazing. What do you like about it and why? And yet no one does that. Literally hundreds of comments, and the closest we got to explaining why people like the Fallout TV show is, well, a lot of people like it. You're stupid for not liking it. Never, by the way, did I say that I don't like it. I said it's a 5 out of 10, by the way. Idiots. Anyway, let's see if third time is the charm. Please, just try. Just try to be not a complete moron and explain why you like things, okay? People who can't explain why they dislike things and why they like things are people who peak in McDonald's. Do you want to peak in McDonald's? Probably not, so better learn logic.
So I finished watching season 1 of Fallout, and I have quite a few thoughts I want to share about it. And based off many of the reactions I've been seeing online, I think I have a bit of a different...
Dude, this is such a great character. Too bad we don't see too much of her, but she's a great character.
...reception compared to a lot of the Fallout fans out there. But also importantly, this video won't be getting into any major spoilers for the TV show. If you want to go in completely blind...
By the way, I will completely spoil everything if it requires to be done for the conversation.
This is probably a good one to avoid, because I will talk about some things on a very high level, but I won't be spoiling any major plot points, although get subscribed, because I am going to be doing a spoiler discussion video in a couple of days. So overall, I thought the Fallout TV show was really good, but for Fallout fans specifically, I think this one was fantastic. And while I do think it's just good TV for audiences in general, I think when it comes to Fallout fans, the Fallout TV show is a must-watch. The single most impressive part of the show overall to me was how accurately it portrayed the vibe of the Fallout games. Like yeah, getting the props and so much of the setting right was also incredibly impressive, but the intangible feel...
I hate when anyone ever uses the argument of, oh, the sets looked good. Bro, yeah, it's Hollywood. The sets always look at least reasonable-ish. You understand? Does anyone remember the last time they watched a movie or show and they said, yeah, the sets look bad? I personally don't even know if I have ever seen a production that had bad-looking sets.
Of the game was also really captured by the show, which was incredibly enjoyable for me to watch. And scene after scene, things looked right, they sounded right, but they also felt right, which is, I think, a major reason as to why the show is being so widely praised by fans of the franchise. Fallout's actually pretty odd. It's a unique blend of wacky humor, harsh realities, all in this post-apocalyptic backdrop with its own unique set of ideals. But the show does a really great job at representing that. Despite the fact that there is an irradiated wasteland as the backdrop for much of the show, most of the most horrific scenes aren't wasteland specific and are just actions being committed by humans. That felt so very Fallout, and as much praise as the prop and set departments deserve for their beautiful vaults, weapons, and more, the writers definitely deserve massive praise because it feels like
The writers do not deserve a single part of praise, okay? I said the show is a 5 out of 10. The show could actually be severely higher, but the writing, the overall objective, the logic, why things are happening, the moment you start to think about, wait a minute, why things are happening or how they can even happen, it falls apart, okay? Realistically, Lucy's mom died in a nuke or was burnt or something like that by her husband, you know, the Vault 33 overseer, and her Pip-Boy should have been gone because she herself was gone. I really doubt that Lucy's dad would have cared to remove the Pip-Boy for some reason, and if he would have taken it back. So the fact that there's a vault open, Vault 32, how and why? I don't know. Yeah, you see? Again, there's so many things that don't make sense in this show when you just think about them for a little bit. And that is writing. That is the fault of writing. The writers are horrible at explaining things and making things just make borderline sense.
they actually understood why people love Fallout with this show. Although when it does come to the props and sets, they of course did a phenomenal job here as well. I feel like we could even just tell this from many of the trailers, and I'm really happy some of the older games got recognition also. The show overall definitely was inspired by the aesthetic of Fallout 4, but the references to some of the older games made those games feel recognized, which I think went a long way for a lot of fans. But even more specific stuff like Operation Anchorage being a surprisingly large plot point. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of newer fans didn't even realize this was all a reference. But do get subscribed, because I am going to be pointing out
the Ghoul talks about Antarctica and whatnot.
Ton of references in a future video. The show's overall production was top tier, although objectively you could tell some of the CGI wasn't quite perfect. For whatever reason, as I was actually watching, this never took me out of an episode. The Fall TV show was a big budget production, but that was actually felt as you were watching this one. So often they take us to a new place or landscape, and I was completely immersed in everything that was going on, and all of it was incredibly accurate. And considering the fact that they managed to capture the feel of Fallout so well, it's likely no surprise that my favorite parts of the
People say this, but why are they, for example, ignoring episode 2? I think episode 2 is easily by far the worst episode of the TV show. If episode 4 is a solid 7 out of 10, by far the best episode in the show, the episode 2 is literally the worst thing that could ever happen. Episode 2 just takes the world of Fallout and shoves into your face how nonsensically stupid it is. Okay? So, first of all, you have a city which seemingly has no law enforcement at all. And there's a lot of raiders and bad people in it, so why isn't it a bloodbath? Why people are not getting stolen from? I don't exactly know. But that kind of just magically happens when the ghouls start shooting people. There are no guards. There are no people who are going to say, hey, don't do bad things here. You know, you had squirrels on a stick. You also that city felt more Mad Max than a callback to Megaton, honestly, than anything else to me. Because people were just wearing a random fucking garbage on themselves for just the sake of wearing random garbage on themselves. And you can say, oh, those were raiders. Then you're a moron. Congratulations. Raiders don't exactly just randomly stroll into towns, okay? They're raiders, idiot. Okay? So, yeah. A lot of people were just wearing random garbage. The guy who Lucy encounters first to get directions to... Was that actually episode 1 at the end? No. I think it was episode 2. The guy who's clearly just borderline autistic, right? That guy. And half of the Wastelanders are portrayed as complete drooling morons. Yeah. I mean, easily worst episode by far. The fight, though, the fight scenes are all good. Every single fight scene with Walter Goggins, beautiful. Except the very, very last one where it's like, yes. I know I fought Maximus in episode 2 and I could not do anything to him. But you see, now I remember that power armor has this flaw, and now I'm killing every knight and paladin and whoever is there in power armor because you're all made out of tissue paper. That wasn't great.
The Fallout TV show were a lot of the new stuff. Like, yeah, we got to see a vault, which is really cool and exciting. I love getting to see a vault. But many of the new ideas or the expansions they made onto some of the existing lore was incredibly fascinating to me, and I love many of the directions.
I love how, by the way, not a single person is even mentioning the fact that ghouls are no longer ghouls, but they're like just... They magically become feral unless they drink this magical cure. Well, it's not a cure. It like prolongs how long they're not feral or something. Which, again, just creates more questions. For example, so if ghouls started existing right after the bombs were dropped, was the ghoul cure also just readily available there? Who made the ghoul cure and why? Because... if ghouls are created after nukes, and literally the absolute majority of nukes dropped after the war, why would there be anyone who cares about actually fixing the ghouls? Like, what is this magical ghoul cure? Okay? Not a single person who says that this TV show is great even tries to remotely question or answer that part about ghouls. They just completely ignored the ghouls and the Brotherhood.
they took. This, of course, is probably the hardest aspect of the show to cover without spoilers, and expect a lot more discussion on this in my spoiler talk, but between Vault content to even pre-war content to just general Wasteland content, I really enjoyed almost every time we saw something new. The show explores one's own identity as a Vault Dweller, what is important to those people, and how does the rest of the Wasteland feel about Vault Dwellers. We've seen that somewhat in the games, but it's greatly expanded here, and many of my
no one gives a shit about Vault Dwellers. The only one who even remotely mentions them is the store owner lady at the start, and she calls them dipshits. This is completely not something the show even attempts to actually do. This is just made up nonsense right now. The show does not try and do that. The show just, sometimes Lucy says, "Oh, the vaults are so peaceful," and that's literally it.
My favorite individual scenes in the Fallout TV show are pre-war, and it's incredible insight into the world of Fallout. How a society on the verge of collapse is reacting and planning and even confronting that question of what is truly most important to you. The pre-war stuff was good enough that I think this could justify...
Yeah, that's completely made up. I cannot recognize a single part of the show that actually would tackle these issues. Like, what is society in front of collapse? What's truly important to you? Society's at no point at collapse except the ghoul flashbacks. Everything else is completely not even tied to that. And the flashbacks don't ask questions, okay? They don't do any of this. They just kind of show the flashbacks, what's happening, how the ghoul is with his wife, and the wife is like, "We want to be in a vault." And that's kind of it. And then you understand, the ghoul's wife actually cares about being in a vault to save the peoples that they love, but that's not a deep thing. Saving the ones you love is not actually like this deep thing that they explore. It's just something that is done by everyone.
By its own TV show. Give me Vault-Tec, the Enclave, and Cooper Howard all in a corporate drama leading up to the bombs dropping. But down the waist, the Fallout TV show still felt very alive. I think the show does a really good job at portraying the collapse of society, and actually does even a better job compared to some of the games, with showing people struggling. And while so much of the show was just a visual pleasure, and I really enjoyed many of the new things they attempted.
This is probably the worst review we have seen so far, and we're just 4 minutes in, boys. The show does not portray survival as a struggle almost at all. I think he's a misunderstanding of Lucy's character development with the show in general, because Lucy's character development is great. And this is, I think, what he's misunderstanding. For example, that Lucy needs to now drink irradiated water that she herself says most likely was some animal's piss. Okay? Stuff like that she needs to change and adapt and whatnot. That is not the harsh world of the Wasteland. At almost no point is the Wasteland shown actually to be a harsh point, except, episode 2 where the guy drinks the water and he says, "Yeah, well, you're supposed to drink the water." But that's it. No one else is struggling, actually. 2 idiots who in our society would probably not even have first grade education are actually living their best life watching TV constantly while a robot just dismembers people and takes their organs and whatnot. You know what that's called? Not struggling. Again, it's hard to actually find people who are struggling in this series.
Tempted, I did still have some issues with the overall Season 1 writing.
And please don't be a brainlet. When I say struggling, I don't mean, "Oh, raiders attacked them, they're struggling." No, struggling in this situation is meant to represent the overall what's happening to people and how it's just hard to survive. We never see that. At any point, almost. The closest we come to seeing it is the ghoul interacting with his friend ghoul and then blowing his brains out, because they're out of magical vials that keep ghouls alive.
There were definitely some major high points, but also some low points for me. I think they did manage to strike a really nice balance of not boring existing fans while introducing the world of Fallout to many of the new viewers out there, but the fact that they formatted the first season so similarly to how many players play the games wasn't a positive at all for me, and honestly it was one of my biggest negatives. The Fallout TV show is incredibly simple, at least until the final episode. They do this thing where they introduce a decent amount of curiosity and intrigue in some of the early episodes. They give our main character—
No, they don't. This is one of my major gripes with the series, okay? So, episode 1 happens. The Vault Massacre happens. And then you have been given a bunch of questions. Why does the Raider lady know your dad? Why does she take your dad? Why is that necessary? Why are they in the vaults? How they get into the vaults? All of this is actually fine to ask. But the thing is, no one seems to care about any of these extremely obvious, put right in front of us questions for a very long time. And the first real hook for the future of what's supposed to happen is only in episode 4. Again, episode 4 is the best because it has character development, there's a hook, the world gets explained and things like that. And before that, nothing just gets explained. Okay, Lucy needs to go out, find her dad. Congratulations. This is Fallout 3 reference, boys. I hope you understand that. You know? And that's it. And then random things happen. You know? There's no hook. There's no nothing. We get introduced to all these questions again. Raider lady, why she takes the dad, why he matters, what Enclave, Brotherhood of Steel, why does this glowy thing matter, what's the point of it and whatnot. And almost none of this is answered until the very, very, very last episode, honestly. And that's kind of bad, because it's fine to not answer these things immediately, a couple of episodes later, or even at the end. Answering them at the end is fine, but it's like here's the questions being posed, and then at the end the questions are just randomly answered, and in the between, people just completely forget that these questions exist and that they're important, and there's nothing. This is why a lot of people are saying that Lucy's brother is actually the 4th main character, because he actually is there, and he is questioning the things that happened inside of the vault, because nothing that happened inside of the vault makes a single lick of sense. And so he's a great character because he questions these things, because we want answers, okay? But we don't get these answers. It's too slow, no one cares about them, and just random things happen because random things happen.
This major motivation to venture out into a terrifying wasteland. A gigantic move for somebody who is otherwise just a sheltered vault dweller, but then they kind of just ignore that motivation for the rest of the show up until you get to the point where it matters again. A lot of the curiosity that's introduced in the earlier episodes doesn't come up again until the end of the show, and it's—
I'm surprised anyone even mentions this, honestly, yes. Again, this is a huge letdown.
Really just in the finale. It is a perfect recreation of how many of us play the Fallout games. You get the main story right at the start, you get that motivation, then you basically just fuck off to do side quests for 8 to 80 hours before eventually returning to that main story. But in a TV show format, I found this bad, and there's several points in the middle of the show where I was genuinely bored with what was going on screen. The middle of the Fallout TV show really feels like a sitcom to me, where the characters are just interacting with and dealing with whatever is immediately in front of them. The show has some larger myths.
Yeah, like the Cyclops vault. Oh, Maximus, you're shot! Then Lucy randomly just finds Maximus for obviously no apparent reason whatsoever. Yet again! You know, oh, Maximus, you're shot. We need to get we need to find a way to fix your arm, and voila! Not even a second later, they just switch the scene, and there you go. Now you're in a vault. Why are you in a vault? Because the creators just wanted you to be there. Is there an overlying purpose to that vault? No. It's just well, it has a purpose technically, and it is so that Lucy can kind of start questioning what's happening in the vaults, because she sees that vault, it's explained what's happening, and it's not bad, and that makes her question herself, but it's done in such a weak way that who honestly gives a shit? You know? And Well, Maximus just understands that, hey, vault life is pretty good. Even though we don't actually see that he has a hard life himself. Well, we never get introduced to that. And that's kind of also, by the way, bad. Again, the harsh wasteland in the TV show is not really the harsh wasteland at all.
Mysteries and cool ideas that it likes to play with, I just wish they played with that a bit more in the middle, make my brain work a little on some of those inter-episodes. And I think I know why this bothered me. It's not that the show needs to be complicated to be good. Simple shows can still be incredibly enjoyable, but early on they introduced some really compelling mysteries, stuff that I wanted to think about, that I want.
You can Google this actress naked, and there's a lot of her naked, just, friendly to
get to the bottom of, and I hope that would be explored on screen. But in reality, it kind of feels like they just cut to the ending. They cut out the whole middle speculative part. They show you that curious thing, then the next time you see it, you're getting the full explanation on what that curious thing is.
Yes.
There's never really points in the middle where you're left to wonder or speculate or get a clue as to what's going on.
No. You can speculate, but the problem with the show is, again, here thing gets introduced and it's a question, and only at the very end it gets explained, and in the middle it just gets ignored. It's like a thing that just answers itself at a random point without any problems. It's just bad storytelling, effectively. Lucy's not trying to after Lucy goes to Vault 4, she vaults have experiments? We don't have an experiment? She learns that, but we don't move after that. It's like, okay, well, is she gonna set out after she finds her father to find out what's the vault experiment? We don't know. Again, it's like there's this hook that exists and it gets put in, but the characters kind of ignore its existence until it just gets unraveled.
There. A rather large chunk of the middle of the Fallout TV show was just aimless wandering around the wasteland. And this definitely isn't saying the show is bad in the middle. It's more saying that I think it would have
the aimless wandering is completely fine, by the way. You're gonna have moments like this because everything can't be questions, answers, action, and whatnot. You need some respite at points. And I don't think the aimless wandering is bad.
Been elevated by playing with more of the complicated ideas while also showcasing the wasteland misadventures. Because those wasteland misadventures are still a ton of fun. It's still incredibly interesting and oftentimes funny to see what your major characters are getting up to, but it does...
I'm actually worried about season 2 a lot, because the last 3 episodes of season 1 are just a lot of here's this random humor because things are kooky and crazy and random. I don't like that.
All kind of feel a bit pointless. Although, I think Amazon Prime did a phenomenal job at hiding this. The decision to release all episodes at once enabled binging, and I think really helped the overall perception of the show. If we had weekly releases, I think some of those 35-minute middle episodes would feel a lot worse and be getting a lot more flack. But alternatively, you just watch 35 minutes and immediately flow into the next episode.
See, that was episode 4. This one right here. Great shit.
Watch 35 minutes and immediately flow into the next episode, and it's really not that big of a deal. And I actually really enjoyed binging this show. I'm typically more of a week-to-week speculate in the middle type of guy, but this one I sat down to watch one episode and I'd very quickly end up watching several all at once because the flow is so well done with these. And thankfully, when you do eventually get to the conclusion, they tie all of this together super well. So many of the cool ideas they came up with have very satisfying...
Yeah, the conclusion is fine, how they explain things. I agree to that. This fight could have been better. The slow-mo parts are just fucking dumb. But, overall, yeah. The conclusion ties everything and does answer a lot of questions that you have. Obviously, some questions don't get answered. And because they're kind of designed that you forget about them, but they're actually big questions. Again, the mom situation, how did they get in? Why did they wait 11 years to go back in? How does the dad know the leader of the Raiders? Are we going to call them Raiders? I don't think they're actually Raiders. How does the dad know about her? Because he insinuates that he knows about her, but then again he lets her in. It's just so. Don't think about the details, okay?
satisfying conclusions or even just explanations in this show. And they do a great job at introducing a lot of curious or interesting things and then answering many of them, but also leaving a few open-ended. By the end, they definitely set up some of this stuff for a season 2, and I actually really like that. It feels like we're going to have a great time speculating about which direction they could take things
Season 2 is going to be Vegas. There's no speculation.
in going forward. And this definitely doesn't apply to all of the plot lines in the show. Plenty do get attention throughout the show overall, as we basically will revisit those. Every time a vault was on screen, I was having a very good time. And I think the way the TV show handles some of these secondary plot...
Okay, I actually have not talked about this, but this is kind of funny, okay? So, this is Batwoman right here, you know, she's a bad guy. It's kind of funny because she has a lot of interactions with Lucy's brother, and it's like, she's kind of insinuated to be bad, but the way that the dialogue is handled and things are done, when she... I assume she's supposed to give, like, veiled threats to Lucy's brother, but it's so poorly done most of the times, I'm, like, thinking... Sounds just like a person who doesn't really want to talk too much, and they're ending the conversation, and they off they go. It's not actually a big deal. It was funny. It was funny.
A good time. And I think the way the TV show handles some of these secondary plot lines and mysteries involved with those was almost perfect. I was intrigued, speculating, and constantly wondering what would happen next with certain things. I just wish that also applied to the main storyline. But even still, the adventures of Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul are incredibly entertaining. Watching them get up to their random wasteland misadventures was almost always a really fun time, even if oftentimes what they were doing was actually quite simple. Like, yeah, even though you probably know what's gonna happen at the end of going into the Super Duper Mart, it's still a lot of fun to watch them go through that process and see.
True. Again, episode 4. It is the best episode by far. Easy 7 out of 10 minimum.
What kind of weird things they get up to in the middle. And I think a really big part of this is the TV show does a really great job at making you care about the 3 major characters very early on. Each of these 3 characters is incredibly distinct. They all have their own...
Lucy's amazing. The Ghoul is amazing. Maximus is such a wasted potential. It's crazy. And the worst part about Maximus, he has these redemption moments, but at the end, he just always kind of chooses to go back to being, you know, just this stupid, bad person, bully type of character that he starts off with. You know, just someone who thinks that everything should be handed to him, but it's not, and then he gets pissed like a child. His character was absolutely butchered. And that's a shame, because, again, every single actor in this show is really good. Again, Lucy's phenomenal. The Ghoul is absolutely 100% amazing. Maximus is also great, but Maximus' character is the biggest fail by far. It just doesn't add up at all. Especially at the end, he's like, okay, the end kind of almost makes sense, but it's like, oh, the brother, it's my family, I would never do anything, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna now leave you guys to be with this random vault chick I found. Yeah, it's gonna be great, boys. I'm off. You know, it's gonna be fine.
Own ideals, their ways of dealing with this new world, but relatively quickly you get to see how they handle something. Whether this be a strong character struggling and feeling weak in a moment, or even a weak character finally getting power for the first time and how they handle that, or even just what happens when a...
I have no idea are there even any examples of that actually happening here?
Character fails and how they react to that failure. For those of you who have watched the TV show, even though I'm sure all of us have a favorite character out of the 3, I was very quickly able to sympathize with the other 2 options, which is really just phenomenal writing. Unfortunately, at least for me, the phenomenal writing didn't extend to all 3 major characters throughout the entire show. I really enjoyed the stories of both the Ghoul and Lucy.
Lucy is the best character, by the way. The Ghoul is awesome, and his flashbacks are really, really cool. But the Ghoul doesn't get development. Lucy actually gets really good character development. And by the way, I'm just going to put out her character development as it is intended. She starts as a naive, idealistic person who gets thrown into a situation where essentially her whole life view gets kind of shattered to pieces. And then she doesn't succumb to the world around her. She still has her ideals, and she pushes past all the troubles and still keeps who she was at the, intact. She's just more capable, but she doesn't lose herself. It's an absolutely great character, and it's great character development. Maximus has none of fucking that. And the goal, well, the goal's already set in stone, but the goal's just a great character by default. But Lucy is by far the best character.
She has a fairly familiar evolution, what you'd expect of a vault dweller going out into a wasteland while also being naive, but I really like how they handle things with the ghoul. You have this weird dichotomy where he is, not necessarily the best dude as he's adventuring around in the wasteland. You could see this.
A hidden thing that people, I think, missed about the ghouls and Lucy's interaction is he doesn't kill her at random at points. But after, when he doesn't kill her and he finds a use for her, he understands that, wait a minute, she is this unspoiled person who is fighting against the ways the wasteland is. And then he wants to prove to her that he is right and she needs to change to survive. But Lucy shows that she does not need to change to survive. And effectively, that makes her a stronger person than the ghoul, because the ghoul, you saw the flashbacks, he's a great guy. He was a great guy who cared about people and all that stuff. And yet now he's this cold murderer. Because he forsook who he was, because he thought that he cannot survive by not changing. Lucy proves that he was wrong in changing and becoming a verse human. While Lucy herself overcome this and did not change and become a bad person. Again, Lucy's character's really good.
It's even from some of the release trailers. But then he has a bunch of pre-war scenes, and you get to see this other side of him when he was just Cooper Howard. And it really is this cool and unique dichotomy that they've already explored with Westworld, where you get to see two versions of the same character, and it makes you care a lot more about the later version, even if the later version in his own right doesn't necessarily have as much depth. And yeah, how they handled this, and especially how they handled some of the scenes coming up to the ending with these characters, was just phenomenally well done. Sadly, Maximus kind of sucks. I thought Maximus is...
True. Okay, Juicehead is actually... Again, I find it funny that all of these people who say, oh, it's really good, it's blah, 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 it's great to the law, don't address the Brotherhood, what it is and how it's portrayed, or the goals. I find that funny.
Character was kind of strange and at points just flat out bad. I understand what they were going for. Maximus's background and how he was raised has major implications on who he is.
Maximus's background also, by the way, doesn't make a single lick of sense. Because before the last episode where we know that Shady Sands got nuked, we're assuming that Maximus's backstory was effectively that people hurt Maximus? It was raiders or something like that, that people hurt Maximus and then the Brotherhood of Steel saved him. But the reality is, no, Essay was just stuck in a fridge, milk cooler or whatever you want to call it, was stuck in a fridge and then the Brotherhood came out and he was like, you have nothing to do with the fact that I'm alive, but you're so great for it. Now I'm going to dedicate my whole life for it. Like, again, nothing about Maximus makes sense, sadly. It's just a completely forsaken character.
Which really is true for almost all of us. But I think the execution of who Maximus is at certain points in the TV show was just kind of weird. He very rapidly goes from this gunslinging badass in the wasteland to just not, and almost the polar opposite of that. And again, I understand why he's acting in some of those ways, but I just kind of wish they chose a different direction. Honestly, I think Aaron Moten, the person who plays Maximus, had some of the best acting out of all of the characters in this show. But I think the writing was really letting his character down at a lot of moments here.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as we get into season 2, we see much more evolution and growth from this
Now, season 2, he is going to get evolution, obviously.
character, and then I honestly think he could be my favorite out of the show overall. There's so much potential for what they could do with this guy. It just feels like
I agree with this. Unironically, season 2, again, his character got butchered, but he's so close to redemption and making all the stuff that doesn't make sense about him irrelevant.
really let us down with season 1. Thankfully, both the Ghoul and Lucy were exceptional all throughout season 1, and I loved their characters. And one thing I will say is, I feel like we got a nice amount of screen time for all of the major characters. I feel like I got to know each of them. I got to see moments where they had opportunities to grow. And by the end, I didn't really feel disappointed or like I was missing anything. The end...
I mean, you say that, but here's the most disappointing part. Let's see what it is.
I am not a fan of what to me was one of the most genuinely disappointing parts of the Fallout TV show was none other than the score. And this is totally my own fault. Ramin Djawadi did the score for Fallout Season 1.
The score? You mean the music? Huh, that's strange. The music was pretty okay. I really loved when the new Vegas tracks hit in, but, you know, it is what it is. The score was good. I wouldn't call it phenomenal. I personally do not care about the score at all, honestly. But, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, that was Juicehead. This was Quizzer Said. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. I haven't already. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.